Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Hello, happy Sunday to everybody. Thanks for being here. I almost wanted to say what Marcus says. You could be anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here. All right. So first is Adric. Yay. Means it's going to be a good show, right? So thank you for being here, Adric Kapoy. Chef Mike is here. He's looking forward to the conversation. Nina is here. Hello, Auntie. Thank you for being here. Hi, Leon. Thank you for being here. Cynical Optimist. Thank you for being here. I saw Adric say that the intro was blurry, and I'm looking at my Wi-Fi signal, and it's terrible. So you guys tell me if it starts being too glitchy or too weird, and I'll pause it for a second and then try to change over to a different Wi-Fi. I wish I could plug it in. I'm just not in the same room as the Wi-Fi router. Oh, Chef Mike is making a cocktail and grabbing a cigar. Perfect. Leon says he's on the beach drinking a Paloma with extra tequila and dancing to this music with my grandmothers while listening. Perfect, right? It kind of makes you want to, it's great music. All right. Hi, Nick Morrison. Thank you for being here. He has a question for everyone who hasn't hit the like button yet. Just remember to do it on your way in, right? Okay. Thank you all for being here. People who are listening and you haven't said hello in the chat, that's totally fine. And shout out to the replay gang. Before we get into it today, I want to talk just real quick about pivot points. So Wednesdays, if you've not been in there, you don't know about it. For quite a while, I've been doing shadow work Wednesdays, and that's become a bit of a just a name for it, because while we started with Young, who talked about shadow work, we've really gotten into a ton of other things, right? That may help you to do personal growth, but it's gotten bigger, right? So Wednesdays are changing to something called pivot points. And what that means is, just to give you some definitions to tell you my train of thought, a matrix, right? And we talk about that a lot with shadow work, is the environment where develop, right? That includes math. It's just a thing where something develops. Even a math sentence is called a matrix, okay? So we talk about how society is a matrix, right? It's an environment where things develop, but then also it could be sort of an illusion or like a hologram of our imagination. So we have to think about, like, in the Matrix, Neo, is it real or is it made up? So in math, or just in general, a pivot point is, and I'm going to read the definition, a non-zero element that exists to remove other elements. It can be used literally, like in the case of math, it's used a lot in finance, okay? Or figuratively, in the matrix, it is something that has value, right? A non-zero element that exists to remove other things. It's essentially something valuable that removes the BS, the nonsense, the not real, or like a red pill, if we think about the movie The Matrix. So that's what a pivot point is. You can just imagine you're pivoting, right? You're going along doing the same things, and something happens to create a where you pivot. Okay. So Wednesdays are going to be pivot points. Okay. All right. Okay. Nobody's telling me that I'm glitchy. So thank goodness. Thank goodness. All right. So your God is an egregore. It was a little bit clickbaity to say that on there. But honestly, that's literally what we're going to talk about. Religion, historical speaking, what is an egregore? So this one is a bit of a rabbit hole, and there's a lot of stuff that we're going to go through. So if you have ideas, if you have questions, if you have something to add to it, it's something wrong, put it in the chat. This is a discussion, right? We don't give in to cognitive dissonance here, to the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. And we try to use critical thinking. So let's do that. It's refreshing in this day and age to use critical thinking, right? Okay. Okay. So what is an egregore? It's funny when you think of the word egregore, it's like you get this image of this like monster, right? It's like an ogre, you know? So an egregore is a collective consciousness. Okay, this is different than like shadow work where we talk about the collective unconscious. This is a collective consciousness. Okay, it's like groupthink or like hive mind, where there's a group surrounding an idea, and what happens because they're all sort of joined around this idea, the desire for harmony and conformity and to reduce conflict results in irrational or dysfunctional decision making, because the harmony and conformity to collective becomes more important than anything else, right? Its own survival. Okay. The collective consciousness with its distinct ideas and beliefs, right? It's gathered around this thing, starts to almost operate on its own. And it begins to influence the collective of people rather than the other way around, right? It polices itself, or it helps itself to manifest. It's the idea, the collective consciousness starts to almost have this survival mechanism, right? So it's a bit anthropomorphic, meaning it seems like it's come alive, okay? In this collective consciousness to maintain conformity, there is a lot of shaming to enforce behavior, okay? So we'll talk about examples as we go, but I'm sure you guys can think of examples where there's a collective of people around a specific idea, and if somebody tries to question it or deviate from it, they are shamed as a survival mechanism, right? To enforce conformity. So there is also hiding things or dismissing any wrongdoing of the group, right? Or wrongdoing of the idea itself. Okay. New information has to be hid or dismissed so that the collective, the egregore, can survive. There's also threats, or fears that'll be put out, right? You have to do this like super duper super bad thing will happen. Like you have to do this or you're going to go to hell and burn forever, or you have to do this or Trump's going to be elected and we're going to have the Handmaid's Tale, or you have to do this or liberals are going to make your son gay. You have to do this, or like communism or socialism is going to take over. It's like this, you have to conform to the idea or some innocuous super duper bad thing will happen and it's going to be the end of the world and it's your fault completely. That's how we know there's an egregore present, is these things happen to enforce conformity, okay? As a construct, the idea itself enforces swarm intelligence. Okay, think like bees, you know? They don't sit around and have long conversations. It's groupthink. Or, oh my gosh, what was that on Star Trek? Resistance is futile. Who was that? The Borg. The Borg. Yeah, it's like the Borg. Okay. So, oh, hi, Toya. Thank you for being here. Okay. So now that we have an idea, an overarching idea, like in our modern lexicon with the words that we have, what an egregore is or what it could be, let's look at some examples. Okay. Hi, y'all, Borgen. He's going to be part of the replay gang. Awesome. Okay. What are some egregores that fit that definition? Okay. I'm going to take this off of here because at some point I'm going to pull up another video. Okay. So the first one, Adric says it's the Borg. Yeah, we will add you to our collective. Right. Okay. So some examples of egregores. The first one is race. Okay. So first, race is an idea, right? It's a social construct. It's not scientifically grounded reality. Okay. And like, despite the lack of scientific support, it's integral and ingrained in Western societal structures. Okay. It affects perceptions and behaviors. It affects institutional policies. It's a beast, right? So when we say it takes on a life of its own, it is a beast that feels out of control, but it's sustained, it's fed by that collective energy, right? By the collective that swarms together around an idea, and then the idea kind of comes to life, an egregore, and it affects the collective rather than the collective affecting the idea. It starts to police itself. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, we do want to know what Chef Mike is making today, for sure. Leon says, yeah, I'm more on the social aggressive side, and LOL. Let's be real, 1.4% is not a threat to my son to become trans or gay. So literally it's not on my radar. Yeah. So race is one that's an egregore. Okay. Government, the idea of a governing body. Hey, Snowman, thanks for being here. So national identity creates egregores. Okay. It shapes public opinion, drives, suppresses social change, and affects political decisions, right? This whole, I'm an American, America, it's government, national identity. It then takes on a life of its own and affects the people more than the people affect it. The system then does what it was created to do, no matter how much we try to tweak and change. We can tweak and change some things here and there, but it seems like stuff doesn't really stick. But it's because the egregore is already manifested and it has a survival mechanism, right? It has a life of its own, and really it does what it was created to do without people actively interfering or running it. It still runs. It still goes. Think about like when we have government shutdowns, you know what I mean? America as an idea doesn't stop, right? It polices itself. It has a life of its own and it's fed by that collective energy. Okay. Caste systems, which, some people call them class systems, but caste systems, right? This one becomes a little more, not complex, but even deeper, because there's an egregore that is the caste system, right? And then each caste has its little minor egregore to keep them going, right? So the shared values of each caste in the system contributes to the identity's influence and power, such that it becomes fiercely protective of its survival, because each caste playing its role, doing its thing, its own egregore, wants to also keep its parent alive. Okay. It's like the maintenance of it becomes the imperative more than anything else. And religion, again, why I said your God is an egregore. And we're going to talk more about that too. But religion, okay? Religious organizations and spiritual movements often generate powerful egregores, okay? They embody the ideals, the beliefs, and the collective energy of the group, influencing its followers and spreading the influence, okay? The idea of God in this way, like this egregore says God is this, okay? It gives credence to the egregore of God, okay? So in that agreement around that central idea makes it take on a life of its own, which then starts to become reductive, okay? The idea is the thing, none of the other stuff, right? And it becomes so reductive that questioning it or pushing back on it is forbidden, right? Like they'll say, you don't ever question God. You don't question God, which means you don't question the pastor, you don't question the Bible, you don't question the elders, you don't question hidden history, you don't question life, you don't, because survival, okay? Agreement comes in the form of like standardized texts, specific denominations, racial stratifications, incorporation of religious, racist, systemic dogma into the government's identity, right? Like egregores can become huge, right? And you think every denomination is a whole different egregore. It's not. These are lesser egregores that want to keep its parent alive. And now they influence the collective rather than the people creating, the egregore. This is where the statement, man is not created in the image of God, God is created in the image of man comes from. Okay, because we create this egregore of this is our version of God and it is correct and you all are wrong. And so you either get on board with this or the bad, right? You burn, whatever it is, right? That thing happens. Okay. Oh, Chef Mike's heading to a beach party for a cookout and bonfire. Jealous, right? Leon says, I love how God changes and society rises and falls. And that's a perfect example, because if people start to look at, what's written in the Bible compared to how things are changing, right? It changes whether you're supposed to take something literally or figuratively, right? And then people will say, God's words never change. While the Bible has changed multiple times to fit the dogma of the egregore, right? Rather than the egregore adhering to the statements, right? We found the Book of Enoch, we found Dead Sea Scrolls, right? We should be having further context, but right, the egregore must live. Survival is the point, okay? So those are some examples of an egregore given like the modern day interpretation of it, right? You know me, I'm not, I want to rabbit hole it. I want to look all the way around. And so what I looked at was like in esoterics, in ontology and metaphysics. Ontology is just like the study of life as it is by comparing things together. So if somebody says ontologically, it's like the way it is, but also comparing apples to oranges. Okay, so that's what it means when people say ontologically. So in esoterics, again, I'd say I take something esoteric and make it not soteric. Esoteric just means something that's so complicated that most people won't understand it, which I think is crap and reductive. So if something is esoteric, we just have to figure out the way to make it not soteric. Okay. So esoterics, ontology, and metaphysics. The egregores are the unsleeping who keep watch. Interesting, right? Unsleep, they're awake all the time, right? But we kind of think about like the beast of national identity and race and religion and all that. Of course they don't sleep, right? It never sleeps. It's like New York, it never sleeps, right? Chef Mike says, it seems that the egregore is retrofitted to protect itself in history. Exactly. History has to be changed to maintain the egregore, right? It has a survival instinct. It's almost anthropomorphized. It creates a life of its own, right? Hi, BR Charles. Legions or just energy? That's what we're going to figure out, right? Chef Mike says, God said this about this piece of land, right? As they're scribbling. God said, see? I always say, who told you that, right? Because there's this logical fallacy that I'm just going to use Christianity as an example, but I'm sorry, I'm picking on Christianity, but and please, people, sit in your cognitive dissonance. Just because I have a critique of modern day Western Christianity does not inherently mean I am not Christian. And just because I say it doesn't inherently mean I'm not, or that I'm not Christian, that doesn't inherently mean I am Christian. Sit in the discomfort. It's okay. Okay. I got off on a tangent. But there's this logical fallacy that happens, and another way to identify an egregore, right? Because the logical fallacy that happens is one of the tenets of the Christianity is that all humans are flawed. They're all liars and sinners. Okay. They're born liars and sinners, and they will die liars and sinners. There, but for the grace of God, you would be burning in hell, right? How am I supposed to trust you people? You're liars and sinners. Right? Like that's the logic, you know what I mean? Like, well, they say, well, then read the Bible. Well, who wrote down the Bible? Who translated the Bible? Who originally wrote down the Bible? And then people will say, well, it was God that originally wrote it down because the Holy Spirit moved those people to write those words. And I'm like, well, who told you that? Humans. Oh, a human told you that happened. You see what I'm saying? Like, how do we know that's actually what happened? So that's the logical fallacy. Like, I can't believe any of you on what it is because you say yourself, you're liars and sinners. Okay. Chef Mike says, it's like when you ask who gave the queen the right to rule, and the answer is God. Right. Well, God, that you were a demon. Which one? Who's right? You know what I mean? Or, it just made me think of, it's also like when the police investigate themselves, like, well, we looked and we decided we didn't do anything wrong. Or like, who gave you the power? Well, I asked and it was God. Like, how am I supposed to believe you? You know what I mean? So back to esoterics, ontology, and metaphysics. Okay. The egregoros, right, and that's the Greek way to say it, are the unsleeping who keep watch. They are called the watchers. Okay, so the egregores are called the Watchers in esoterics, ontology, and metaphysics. Okay. Now, I think you've heard the term the Watchers before, right? Haven't you? I have, multitude of ways. And so, as I'm looking at this, I'm like, the Watchers. So let's talk about different ways we've heard the Watchers. Okay. All right. The first one is my favorite, quantum physics. Quantum physics talks about the Watchers. Okay. Weird, huh? Leon says about a few thousand men and about 17,000 errors written. Yeah, did you guys know when King James updated the Bible, he changed like 30,000 things, right? And one of them is that you can get divorced because he wanted to get divorced. So he retrofitted the Bible to fit what he wanted to do. Okay. All right. So quantum physics, stick with me here. We're going to make some stuff not esoteric. So using something called the Copenhagen interpretation, right? The observer effect and quantum measurement, we learn about the watcher. Okay. The theory used to be like that everything exists as a wave of energy until it's observed. Okay. When it's observed, it collapses into like a matter form. Now, remember, when I say wave of energy, literally how we perceive, right? Energy waves come into our ears and our brain interprets it and tells us what we're hearing. Light waves come into our eyes, our brain interprets it and tells us what we're saying, right? And even when we eat, that's energy. Think calorie, right? Calorie is energy, energy is calorie, caloric intake. We literally are interpreting little dense forms of energy. So that shouldn't necessarily be a weird thing to think of, that everything just kind of exists in an energy wave until we look at it or we hear it or we taste it or we feel it, right? It collapses into matter, right? It means that we're not interacting with the physical world, but kind of creating it as we go based on the energy waves that are available to us, right? So since the known universe doesn't always like cease and move into waveform when we're not looking, there must be some sort of overall watcher, the observer, right? It sort of answers the question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is no, it does not. Because if there's not an ear for the sound waves to go to, and then we interpret sound, there is no sound. It's just an energy wave. Okay. Chef Mike's talking about the Book of Enoch. I'm going to talk about that. That's where you heard the Watchers before. And I'm going to talk about where the Watchers are talked about. Tori's like, yikes. And says, not esoteric. Yeah, that's my job, I think. I feel myself. And Egregores me. My job is now to make things not esoteric. Okay. Cynical says Marvel Comics. I'm not going to talk about Marvel, but you will see where the inspiration for that came from. Toya thinks about Fringe. Yeah, the energy takes form only when there's an observer. Exactly. Hi, Rocky. Thank you for being here. Yeah, you can see it, right? So I want to talk a little bit about in quantum physics, when we talk about the observer effect, right? And I'm using the word watcher and observer interchangeably because it's used interchangeably a little bit. Anyway, the observer effect kind of proved that overarching theory of we sort of create things as we observe them. They don't always exist in that form. Think Schrodinger's cat. You know what I mean? Schrodinger's cat was, Schrodinger said, if you put a cat in the box, if you don't observe it, how do you know it's still there? You don't. I mean, even if the cat dies, obviously, because you've put a cat in the box, doesn't sound very nice. You wouldn't know until you observed it. You have to observe to know what is. Okay, so the double slit experiment, it gets referenced a lot in quantum physics, and it sounds illogical. There's a lot of things in quantum physics that sound illogical, and there are some things that are kind of like black holes. You know, if you guys ever want to talk about black holes, I like black holes. I can make them not so, but it's because those things move beyond physical laws. Okay, double slit experiment. So I'm gonna explain it in a way that you guys will totally get it. I'm gonna make it not esoteric. You're totally gonna get it. There were quantum physicists who wanted to see how light behaves when it goes through slits, like it's like a piece of paper or a barrier of some kind. They put a slit in there and shot some light through it, and they want to see, because everything is energy waves. They wanted to see how it reacts. It's just a study they thought of. So they make a slit and they send it through, and it's exactly what they thought. It goes, and then it's on the wall on the other side. Okay. They made 2 slits and some weird stuff happened. Okay. So as an example, think about it this way. You are going to throw bouncy balls at the wall. So you put up a barrier and you put 2 slits there, and you're trying to throw the ball through the slits. Okay. And so some of the balls that you throw aren't going to go through the slits. They're going to hit the barrier around the holes and bounce away. The ones that go through are going to make a mark on the wall behind it. Okay. So as you've thrown these balls through the holes, you look and there's marks on the wall. Okay. So keep that in mind. Another thing to think of, like if you drop a rock into a pond and you see the waves that come out like this. So imagine you put a barrier on, in the water, and the top of the water goes kind of through the middle of the barrier, and you drop the rock, and it comes out and those little waves and they hit the slits. What you think it would do is that, part of it goes through the slit and it continues that progression of getting bigger and bigger outside the 2 slits. They kind of overlap as they go out, which is true, by the way. That's what happens with that. Okay, keep those 2 things in mind. Okay. The scientists thought that when they sent light, and the way that they sent light is they sent photons, which are the little balls, like in the example, little photons through the slits. So they thought when they sent the photon through the slits that it would act like the ball example. And when there was one slit and they sent the photon through it, it did act like the ball. It hit and created one mark and it was a ball. Okay. What happened is when they made 2 slits, what hit the wall was not a bunch of marks like the ball, like in the ball analogy. It was ripples, like the pond analogy. So instead of the photon hitting the back wall, all they saw was these ripple lines, and how each ripple gets less and less intense. That's what they saw, like bright lines, lesser. It was like these bars were on the back wall. But they sent these photon balls through. Like what they sent was a ball. What showed on the other side after there was this momentary non-observance, right, as it goes through the slit, is waves. So this is why we talk about the double slit experiment. Okay. So what they say is like, this is how they explained it. And then they've experimented on it so much to prove it. This is it. When you observe or look at a photon, it's a ball. Okay. But when you send it through the slit, you lose the capability of measuring it. It acts like a wave. Okay. Essentially, it is showing all possibilities of where the photon could hit the wall behind it. Like, one ball showed the one place. Multiple balls showed all the places, right? So in the ball, example, when you look at the wall after you've thrown tons of balls through those slits, if you drew a line around all the different options, that's what it did. So you send more than one photon through, you lose, so momentarily, right? The ability to look at it and measure it and see that it's a ball. It then shows you anywhere it could hit. It shows you all possibilities, which is a bit mind-blowing, right? So it showed that an observer, a watcher, a way to perceive it influences physical reality. As soon as you're not observing it, it has multiple answers, right? It's kind of where we get the multiverse, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, okay? Quantum Bayesianism or Cubeism takes that a step farther and says that the watcher's feelings, beliefs, and decisions affects how it drops from wave to mass, right? So your state of mind affects how it drops into matter, so how you perceive it, right? Think about confirmation bias, those kind of things. This lends to like, there has to be a watcher observing all quantum waves that created mass, right? Like the Big Bang. There had to be a watcher that saw or observed quantum waves, and then boom, we've got mass. Okay. Hopefully y'all stuck with me. Yeah, Chef Mike says Schrodinger's cat, the cat is both dead and alive until it is observed. Right. Both things exist at the same time until you can observe it. The waves, right? All possible answers exist at the same time until you observe it. Okay. Hopefully we're getting we're staying in not soteric, right? Stick with me here. Okay. We're also of the watcher, right? Astrophysics and the idea of the cosmos, right? We've heard that before. And I said just a little bit ago, anthropomorphic, meaning that it almost becomes alive, right? It almost becomes a beast, or we can attribute biological characteristics to something that we can't see. Okay, that's what that means. So when we look at I think my dog might be chewing up something that it's not supposed to. So give me one moment. All right. Thank Egregore, because there was a remote control happening. Okay. Adric says, the Highlander, we observe, we record, but we never interfere. Right. Think of Star Trek again. Okay. So the idea of the cosmos, astrophysics. So in anthropic principles of astrophysics, either there's two possibilities. the universe's properties, overarching properties, are compatible with human existence because we are here observing them, right? So, they're compatible with each other. Or all properties of the universe allow life to develop, meaning our observation of it, because it's part of it. So either observation is compatible with everything in reality, or we create everything in reality, right? Now I'm going to use some names of people that you might have heard of before, to just, because we see these people sometimes in videos, it's good to know like what they say. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, which some things he does I like, some things he does I don't agree with, and it's okay. It's okay. He explained that when you measure a quantum system, right, it always affects its state, right? Think butterfly effect, or we observe, we record, but we never interfere. What he says is the recording interferes. It creates interference, right? The observation itself makes it act differently than when it's ignored. Okay, so it's like the pieces or the particles of it exist in multiple states, but collapse into a single state when it's measured. But this also means that quantum entanglement can happen. Okay. Quantum entanglement is like the state of one set of particles can influence another set of particles, regardless of how far apart they are, which is interesting because for some reason they got correlated with each other, right? And that's a way to measure. We correlate things together. Well, then somehow they're inextricably connected, no matter how far apart they are. And waves will collapse in certain ways at the certain time, almost like now they have this psychic connection or something, right, with each other. Okay. The particles, kind of seem sentient and act without somebody acting on them, right? This entanglement, or an egregore, maybe where we get things like the Mandela effect, right? So if you guys don't know what Mandela effects are, it's like you will have a huge group of people remembering something in a completely different way than what like reality says it was, but they all have the same memory together. Okay. The reason it's called the Mandela effect is because the first time it ever happened was when Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. That's why it's called the Mandela effect. And then there's just more and more and more and more and more, almost like it's speeding up. We get tons and tons of them, which also kind of leads to the multiverse theory, right? That maybe we have this leaking spillage from other multiverses. And so these collective memories are like the remnants of egregores that we had, right? Now, quantum entanglement is also how the government tried to do remote viewing. It was like, if we correlate two people together and then we send this person over here, then can I utilize the quantum in my mind to see what the other person is doing? Years and years and years and years and years and years of experimentation that the CIA did. And the fun part is that all of those documents are now released. So you can go read all about remote viewing. Okay. Stephen Hawking, he's another quantum physicist or astrophysicist. He denied any existence of God or anything like that, right? But in 2018, he theorized that after the Big Bang, right, that all the quantum waves kind of branched out, like there's the Big Bang and they go, whoo, almost like a spider web. And there's like these little bubbles that are on these branches. There's these little bubbles. And And our known universe, everything that we know, is inside one bubble. And each bubble is an alternate universe or a part of the multiverse, right? It's like it's a fractal of the original, which we're going to talk about fractals here in a little bit. It's an important word, so remember that. It's a fractal of the original thing, right? It's a complex pattern that is repeating over and over as it branches out, right? Kind of like the pond, ripples out, right? But it gets smaller and smaller and smaller because there's less and less energy. Like, think like a seashell, right? It's the same pattern over and over and over and over and over and over down to just a tiny thing, right? But also lightning is a fractal, right? Like you have the bolt of energy and then you have all these lesser things that come off, or like tree, right? You have the trunk and you have fractals that come off of it. And then there's another fractal off of fractal and another and another. Okay. All right. Well, let's get back to watchers. Okay. Rocky says Brahma's bubbles. I like that, but I don't remember that. Is that in the Rig Veda? Maybe. Tell me. I want to read it. Okay. Watchers. Get back to watchers. Because the Book of Enoch was brought up. Okay. So from a quantum science perspective, we understand the watchers, right? You have to watch something. You have to observe it. To have physical reality, it has to be watched. Okay. Biblically. Okay. In the Christian Bible, there are entities called the Gregori, okay, or the Egregorii. I'm not going to keep saying that one, right? The Gregori, which is also where we get Gregorian chants, by the way, because we get it from Pope Gregory, who was named after blah, 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 blah. May get into that another time. But in the Bible, there's the Gregori. The Gregori are the sons of the Elohim, okay? Which, depending upon how you want to believe, it's either the sons of God or the sons of the gods, the Elohim, right? They are the fallen angels who marry and mate with human women, and then those women give birth to the Nephilim. So a lot of times we hear the word Nephilim or Nephilim. I say Nephilim, but that also makes me think Heffalump. Anyway, this is why I have notes, guys, because then my brain goes Heffalump. Anyway, most people have heard of the Nephilim, right? But we don't really talk about the Gregori, okay? Nor do we really talk about Elohim. But biblically, the Gregori are the sons of the Elohim. The Gregori are the ones who married, depending upon the story, and had sex with human women. And then the women gave birth to the Nephilim. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? Because the Egregorii, the Gregori, egregore means watchful, right? It means the watchers, okay? They're also called the giants. They are also called the Irin, and they obviously are called the watchers, okay? There's a story told in Genesis about their fall and mating with human women. Eventually, the Greeks reduced the watchers to the gods of the four winds, right? Christian theologians, in trying to discredit or absorb pagan beliefs, joined the concept of the Gregori, the watchers, to an evil class of fallen angels known as the principalities of air. Okay, keep this in mind, right? So Christian theologians said the Gregori and the principalities of air are the same entities, right? St. Paul in the New Testament calls the fallen angels the principalities, okay? And he says, for we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in high places. Interesting. Okay. But again, these are the Watchers. Okay. St. Paul also referred to Satan as the prince. That's where we get principalities. Okay. That's the princes. The prince of power of air. Okay. And thus made the connection of Satan himself to a star, right, in Isaiah, and these etheric beings. They were later known as demons, but still called the principalities of air. Okay. Again, of air, because we can't see them. We can only observe them by their works. Okay. Hope you're keeping it in mind. Hope you're all with me. Leanne says, oh Lord, so women had relations with aliens and men had to settle for monkeys. Leon. Okay. We're still talking like biblically and ancient, where we hear about the Watchers. The Septuagint book of Lamentations mentions the Gregori, the Watchers. The book of Jubilees, the Egregori, are called the Watchers, and they're also called sentinels. And in Jubilees, there's good ones and there's bad ones, right? But the story still focuses on the bad ones who fell from grace and slept with the human women, right? The book of Enoch, right? We hear about the Watchers. The Egregori are dispatched to earth to watch over the people. Then they marry and have babies with human women, and those babies, the Nephilim, become heroes. So see, it depends on the story, right? Because some people are talking about the Gregori saying like they raped the women, they, did bad stuff, and the Nephilim were terrible, destructive creatures who, destroyed everything and had to be taken down. And then the book of Enoch is like, the Egregori came and they married some women and they had some babies. They were the Nephilim. The Nephilim were heroes. So how do we know? You know what I mean? All right. Some ancient references to the Watchers. There were 4 royal stars called the Watchers in Mesopotamia. Right? These are the Watchers. Jewish folklore described them, the Watchers, the Egregore, as large human beings that never slept and remained forever silent. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, they tell of Samyaza, which is the leader of the fallen angels, who's mentioned in Enoch, right? So we even know the name of one of them, Samyaza, right? By the way, I have a whole list of the names of the Gregori. Anyway, some ancient and some new age, even spirituality sects also have taught that the egregore of an idea actually comes to life and can haunt people, much like a ghost or a demon. Okay. So they say it actually does become a principality of air, right? In ancient Egypt, the Ma'at were the entities around the god Ma'at, whose job it was to oversee the cosmos and human affairs, and he was the Watcher. Also in ancient Egypt, we have Horus. We have the Eye of Horus, who always watches, right? Always there to protect. And then there's a ton of multiple lesser gods who are guardians, right? They are forever watchful guardians of particular like individuals, okay? So even in ancient Egypt, we've got the Watchers. Rocky says, aren't there 200 egregore fallen angel names? Not that I found. There may be somewhere else. Not that I found. But we are going to talk about names just a little bit, okay? So how do we like take all these descriptions and make sense of it, right? Come to some sort of like greater truth. Well, the first thing that I do is that I say, okay, so this label or this word, egregore, is used to describe 3 things, right? 1, a concept or an idea that creates hive mind and starts to have a life of its own, and to some may even become a sentient entity. Okay. 2, it's an entity that observes the overarching universe, which either caused the Big Bang or continues to observe the universe to maintain order in a quantum wave process. Or 3, it's a specific giant entity who were the sons of God or gods who mated with human women and made Nephilim. And they are either destructive or heroes, depending upon the source, but were sent here to watch and protect humanity, and then evolved into archangels and guardian angels. So that's where I want to say names, okay? Because the names of the archangels that we talk about now and guardian angels were originally stated as Grigori, you know, Aziel, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, all of those were names of the Grigori. And then we rebranded it and called them archangels. Okay. Those aren't all the names. I mean, some of the other names, Azazel, Barakel, Chazkiel, Kokabiel, Penemue, Sariel, Samiaza is in quite a few things. Shamziel, like all kinds of names. And notice a lot of them have El at the end, think Elohim, you know, because they're the sons of the Elohim. Okay. So with those 3 things who all seem like very, very different from each other, can they exist in the same God? Right? Can it exist in the same the Watcher? Right? Can it describe the same thing, be it an entity or not? Now, interestingly enough, I'm going to propose a couple theories to you. Okay. All right. So the first one is Rocky. I have not read the Holy Tablets. I've read the Emerald Tablets, the Dead Sea Scrolls. What is that work by Hermeneutic, which is Hermes Trismegistus, who is also another name for Thoth. So those things I have, but I'm not sure what the holy tablets are. Because when you say holy tablets, it makes me think of like the 10 Commandments. So I'm not sure. Okay, here's 2 theories I'm going to propose. Just see what you think about it. Okay, the first one is that the known universe is a giant brain, and that galaxies as neurons through that cosmic web. The same, okay, so like everything is inside a giant brain. That's theory 1. So here's what I'm going to tell you. When you take pictures of neurons and galaxies, they look the same. So that's number 1. And this idea of that we are living in like a giant brain has been around for a very long time. But the interesting thing is it's still studied because they keep finding proof. They're not able to wholeheartedly dismiss the theory because they keep finding more proof of it. Okay. So researchers found that the distribution of matter throughout the known universe forms this cosmic web of filaments and nodes. And it is eerily similar to the structure of a neural network in the brain. Okay. The more it's studied, more similarities find. Okay. Even when they think they hit a brick wall, eventually they find more about it, right? In 2020, an astrophysicist and a neurosurgeon got together to study this idea further. And they found that the galaxies and the neurons and the net actually functions similarly as well. It's not just that, well, physical matter distribution, of course, it's the same, right? Anywhere you go. right? The laws of physical properties, yada, yada, yada. So maybe it looks exactly alike, but come on. Well, what they found is that they function the same as well, right? Did I miss a page? Now that's going to be sad if I did. I totally did. We're going to go back. We got to go back because you guys have to hear this. Forgive me. All right. When we were talking about ancient references, and we're going to go back to these two theories in just a second. We got to talk about turtles first. We got to talk about the turtles. I'm so sorry. There's something called turtles all the way down, okay, which is infinite regression. Turtles all the way down includes something called the watcher. Okay, so this was another example. I'm so sorry, guys. This is when my notes are all over the place. So there's a theory that the world sits on top of a turtle who is standing on a turtle, 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 who is standing on a turtle for infinity. Okay. The world on top of a turtle exists in Hindu, Chinese, and Native American ancient mythology. They all, at the same time, all said the world sits on top of a turtle. Okay. In philosophy, if somebody says turtles all the way down, it means that with each layer of truth, it just keeps going and you never get to the end. It's turtles all the way down. Okay. The turtles are a representation of the watchers in a way that the watchers of the turtles participate in the creation reality through our observation, right? It's on the back of the, okay. Gosh, I'm so sorry I missed that. So you got to know that one. Now back to the philosophy, back to being in a brain, right? So we're all inside a brain instead of turtles atop turtles atop turtles all the way down. It might be brains inside brains inside like brains inside a brain inside a brain and inside a brain all the way down. Okay, so the mind inside the brain is who observes, right? That's what makes reality. Okay, because just like we can observe our mind, we can think. That's observing your mind, right? You're thinking. That's the watcher, right? So the brain that we're inside of is the watcher. But does that mean that each neuron that we have is a galaxy inside our brain that has more sentient conscience brains inside of it that then influences us? So brain inside a brain inside a brain inside a brain. Okay, that's one theory. All right. Does it fit the 3 criteria of an egregore? Okay. Is it a concept that takes on a life of its own? Yes. The universe and the mind continue its physical path of sentient individuality beyond, right? Like your parents had an idea of you, but you became your own thing. Okay. So yes, takes on a life of its own. Does it watch over the known universe? Well, sure. Since we're in its brain, its mind is observing, thinking, and feeling about whatever's going on inside of it. Okay. Is it the son of a god who came to watch over humans and created Nephilim? Okay, well, this one's harder, right? So, I mean, like, if we think from a biological perspective, right? What are that are introduced into a brain? So I'm going back to the Nephilim coming to Earth, right? Or the Egregores coming to Earth to watch, to do a specific, to observe humanity, right? So in a biological perspective, if something is introduced into a brain that's not just, there, what are they, right? So then, like, were there Egregores and anti-anxiety medication? Right? If this is a brain inside a brain, like, but that makes me think, like, was Jesus an antibiotic? Because of some brain infection where, like, all the neurons are thinking wrong. So we have to introduce Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha or Brahma or Shiva or, this is like medication for, you know, our brain illness, our personality disorder of humanity, right? Oh yeah, the movie Gabriel. Yeah, it was a good movie actually. Leon says, I never used the turtle, but I told BGS as I find the truth, I put it in the bucket, but the bucket just gets bigger, right? You've got buckets inside of buckets inside of buckets inside of bucket inside of a bucket forever, right? So there's one concept, and that one's not an egregore, okay? I'm going to give you another concept. Let's look at this one. Yeah, Adrian Hicks says, I saw those individuals as more of an antibiotic for society. Yeah, like if we're a brain inside a brain, then if something from outside, extraterrestrial, right? Something from outside gets introduced for a purpose, it's a medication. It's just like a medication. It's like if we take an anti-anxiety med or an antibiotic or a Tylenol or, right? What was that movie? It was like a cartoon movie that, you know, the pill, the antibiotic comes in because of the big zit. Hopefully you guys know what I'm, it's not a Mandela effect and I sound crazy. Okay, well, I may sound crazy, but whatever. Okay, so another proposal, okay, is the I am fractalization, okay? So remember Hawkins who said fractals out, which is like, you know, there's the big thing and then there's a piece and then it branches and there's a piece and it branches and it branches and it branches, like lightning or trees or whatever, even a seashell. It's just smaller, 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 smaller. That's fractal, okay? In this way, the word creates the multiverse, okay? So it's like how a galaxy in a picture looks the same as a neuron, right? But the distribution and patterns of matter are exactly the same no matter how big or small it is, right? So out here, patterns are going to be the same as they are right here, as they are microscopically, right? As above, so below, right? So the distribution and pattern is exactly the same, no matter how big or small. And all patterns come from functions. Okay, it's like cymatics. You guys know what cymatics are? Let's do a side note. Let me pull this up. We're going to talk cymatics just real quick because we need to know how all patterns come from a vibration. Is it this? My goodness. How many things am I going to share? Oh, it's this one. Okay. So I'm going to show you what cymatics are. Okay. So cymatics, this is a metal plate and he has electricity hooked up to it and just like a thin layer of sand on top. And as he changes the frequency, watch what happens to the sand. Okay. So what you saw with that, and that was discovered a long time ago, is that patterns are made by frequency. And what they did then with this Chladni is to then look at nature and then see that every pattern in nature is coincides with a specific frequency. Okay, so in the I am fractalization, right, the word, the spoken word, the vibration, right, creates this big bang, right? The vibration makes the pattern that goes on like a fractal, right? As above, so below. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? It's just the amount of matter that the vibration has to work with, right? how it can pull it into matter. So like all little things are just smaller versions of the bigger thing. Okay. So like a tree, the branches get smaller and smaller. They're fractals of the trunk. Or lightning, it branches into smaller pulses, but it's just fractals of the original electromagnetic shock. In that way, that means there's a first thing. Okay. Just like with trees, lightning, and things like that, right? There's a first thing that everything then fractals off of, which would be the watcher or God, okay? Just fractals of the original thing, right? In metaphysics, the I am of God is a fractalization story. God spake, I am. You know, it's almost like God woke up one day and was like, "What's this? I've never been awake before. That there is no before, there is no after, and there is nothing here. But if I'm awake, what am I?" So God said, "Well, I am," and created fractals of himself simply so that he could see and observe and experience himself. Okay, that's in metaphysics fractal theory. Okay, there was no mirrors, there was no nothing when God woke up and said, "Well, I am." And so he fractaled himself, he big banged himself simply so he could see and observe himself, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, so does fractal theory answer those three questions about what an egregore is? Something a hive mind around a concept? Sure, it's a bunch of small things that make up one big thing that is all about survival, right? So an entity that watches over the known universe, well, in that way, sure, because it is the known universe, right? It's trying to observe itself, right? Is it specific entities that came and mated with smaller entities to make different entities whose job it was to watch the smaller entities? I mean, maybe it's the same thing, whether big or small. You know, maybe it was a previous fractal. Who's to say, right? All right. Hi, Spain man. Thank you for being here. Oh my gosh. Osmosis Jones. Thank you, Rocky. Osmosis Jones. Yes. Yes. Jesus was an antibiotic. Sound on water. Yeah. Does the cymatics do that? Yeah. Adrian says that sand looks low vibrational. The beginning one, but did you guys see the last one? It literally looks like the shell of a turtle or a tortoise. That's literally the vibration that creates that. Leon says we did that in physics. Yeah. Hi, Spain man again. Chef Mike says they make the same patterns that you find in cathedrals, you know, the cathodes. Yeah. Around the world through a magnetron. Yeah. Right. So it's like we knew this at one point in time. I mean, there's also been some work around like organs and bells. You know, every town had certain bells that were certain frequencies. Organs create certain frequencies in the churches. You know, there's some work being done about, you know, how did that affect the people that are in there? What was it trying to do? You know? All right. So the whole point is to think deeper about every concept and every system and things that you're taught about from other human beings that actually affect you, right? Like think deeper between this idea of an egregore developing around a collective concept, which can become malevolent, and the transcendental proposal that society or collectives of people around a concept becomes sick and destructive. It's the same thing as the Gregor. It eventually spawns itself and becomes bad. Okay, it's the same thing. Okay, it's imperative to question what you're told. Okay, there are many theories about the existence of God, whatever, the nature of reality, the nature of existence, that don't hold the qualities of like the malevolent egregore, right? There's no mandated, there's no life of its own focused on survival over humanity. There's no transactional means to an end, do this or you're going to hell. There's no dogma or like legislation to ensure that you are compliant to this idea of God, right? So the point is to ask questions, study the thoughts behind the ideas. It may literally confirm what you're thinking, or it could be a pivot point. Okay, that's all the info, by the way. I knew there was going to be a ton. I knew it was going to be way more than an hour. But something to think about. I really, really, really want to get more into like critical thinking and really looking at stuff, because, you know, standardized education did a number on us. Okay. Chef Mike says that makes me consider the thought of the watchers being larger humans. Right. Or man made in the image of God, a fractal of God. Or are we, you know, or is God made in the image of man? Okay. Adrian says it's imperative to question what you are told. Clipping that. Yeah. Right. And remember, if there's shaming language and threats around questioning, then you know an egregore exists, right? If you're told, well, you cannot question God, or you can't question your government, or you can't question your a political candidate, you know, you can't question, you can't, and there's all the shaming and attack and all that. That means there's an egregore whose survival is more important than humanity. So to me, when there's an egregore, you look harder. You ask more questions because there's something there. Okay. All right. So coming up this coming Wednesday for Pivot Point, we're about the psychology of symbology. So symbols, right? We live in a world of symbols, and symbols have been around for all of documented humanity, right? Symbols are important and they do affect your psyche. So Pivot Point this coming Wednesday is the psychology of symbols, or the psychology of symbology. All right. And then next Sunday, we're going to kind of back up just a little bit, and we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance and critical thinking, and kind of how we've lost that skill due to no fault of our own, right? It's because of standardized education. Okay. And so we're not taught what cognitive dissonance is, and we're not taught critical thinking. And it becomes very, very obvious, especially around egregores. It becomes very, very obvious in the way that we debate and try to have discourse, right? I mean, we live in a world where somebody will say, well, what about this? And then some other people come in and just call them names and say they're dumb. And it just, the straw man and all the fallacies, and it gets crazy. So we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance and critical thinking, because I think if anybody resonates with me and they're watching my stuff, they get it. We can discourse, right? And so we're just going to lay some groundwork, some framing around what is cognitive dissonance, you know, critical thinking, how to utilize critical thinking, how to really question what's going on to come to a greater truth. You know, I'm going to kind of bring back ancient philosophy ways, ancient philosophers, and how they tried to find truths. And think about all the information we've gotten from philosophers. It's amazing, right? Adrian says, due to no part of their own, not clipping that. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Spainman says, oh God, yes. Yeah. I want us to be able to get into some discourse, right? and come to some fundamental truths that have nothing to do with the egregores. My gosh, how many egregores are we surrounded by on a daily basis that are only concerned with their own survival and not humanity? It's crazy. It's crazy. So here, I'm gonna point them out, right? Oh, 0, yeah. Okay, so Leon says, can you include zero-sum theory with it? Yep. Make myself a note. Yep, got it. Yeah, I definitely will. I'll include that as well. I haven't made all my notes, well, my coherent notes. I just have a bunch of scribbles. So yeah, plenty of time. I'm a little behind on my notes. I got so into the egregore stuff that I'm a little behind. Sorry. Okay, so that's the hope. I hope that you guys can, especially the shadow work people. It's almost like we had shadow work level 1, shadow work level 2, and now we're going to way beyond shadow work, but it still applies, right? To do pivot points. Hope everybody can start joining on Wednesdays for pivot points. And then also, of course, Sundays. So if I don't see you this coming Wednesday, I hope I see you next Sunday. Again, shout out to the replay gang, and thank you everybody who has joined me. I'm noticing some more comments. In Egyptian, a well-known gods to shapeshift as time went on. As they would say, Pivot point Wednesdays. Yes. Zero-sum theory. Okay, we got everything. Okay, if I don't see you guys Wednesday, I hope to see you next Sunday. Thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.